Please welcome another front-end extraordinaire from Flickr, Stephen Woods.
I love you too. Hey, so there's a really bizarre delay going on that's going to probably make it sound like I'm stuttering. So my apologies. I'm here today to talk about HTML5 touch interfaces, which is, I guess, on everyone's mind right now. There's an ongoing debate about are we doing native or are we doing web pages. I'm not going to talk about it. I do web pages. That's my job, so I like them. This is who I am. I'm Stephen Woods. I've been at Flickr for 2 years. I've been at Yahoo for 5.5, and it's just horrible. You don't want to work here. I'm kidding. This is the iPad touch experience we've created for Flickr. If you go to a Flickr photo page on your iPad or your Android tablet, you click the magnifying glass, you're going to get kind of a view like this. You can swipe on it, you can press play and just have an animation go, and it can pinch to zoom on iOS devices. This is all done with JavaScript and HTML. We're not using native pinch to zoom. Please check it out when you get a chance, because it is, in my opinion, having done it, it's pretty smooth. I've been working on desktops for a long time, and I think a lot of you probably have as well. As front ends, what we worry about all the time is the browser technology. We write all this stuff, even for the coolest stuff. We need to make sure that we can support every kind of browser. We need to have a fallback using the filter for IE8. On mobile, we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. On mobile, we get to use WebKit almost all the time. Unfortunately, we have to worry about something worse. Devices. When there's only 5 browsers, it's easy to test in 5 browsers. On mobile, we have, I can just look out in the audience right now. I see iPads, I see Android phones, see the big Android phone, the little Android phone, Kindle Fires. They're all a different screen size, they're all a different CPU, but they all use the same browser engine. I'm not going to spend too much time on screen sizes because this has been covered really well here by Ethan Marcotte. I hope I said his name right. This presentation's up on SlideShare, so you can get the link later. Media queries, breakpoints, liquid layouts, kind of to solve this problem of screen size. But there's another problem that's worse. That's an iPhone 3GS. 256 megabytes of RAM and a 271 Geekbench score. It's an iMac. It's a Bondi Blue iMac. We're trying to make awesome interfaces on a 10-year-old computer. It may look like a cell phone, but really you have to think about it as a bad computer. Now, it does have like a 3DFX Voodoo card in it, but otherwise it's a crappy computer. They're crappy computers with good video cards. But it's still possible to make an experience that seems not crappy. If you use this, you'll feel like it's not a bad experience. And we do that through a lot of tricks, but the biggest one is perceived performance. Again, this echo is interesting. This is, I guess, 5 years or so, I saw a talk about Tivo. Now, the early Tivo devices were really, really, really slow. You would click a button and wait a minute for your show to play. But no one ever complained about how slow a Tivo was. That's because the moment you pushed the button, you heard boop, boop, immediate feedback. So it felt like you were being listened to. I'm asking the machine to do something, and I get a response. On the desktop, we solved this problem really easily. I press delete on a comment on Flickr. I get the little spinning balls. It tells me the interface heard what I asked, and it's working on it. Now, touch devices is a different problem. Like a lot of people in my generation, my first experience with multi-touch was on Star Trek: The Next Generation. You remember the transporter room in Star Trek: The Next Generation? And if you don't remember this, by the way, you're not real nerds and you're not allowed to be here. Chief O'Brien did this. He took all 3 fingers and pulled down on a control. And if you saw over his shoulder, there's a little widget that's moving with his fingers. It's giving him immediate feedback as to what he's doing. He's pulling the transporter things. I don't know what those do. But it feels to him like he's using the old original series machine that was mixer levers or whatever they were. The feedback has to be continuous. So the same thing the Tivo did when you press the button and it makes a little beep. You need to give the user feedback from the touch events, but it has to be continuous feedback or they think the interface died. If you've ever done this, if you've ever used an app that's bad or anything else on your touch device, you'll be scrolling down and the scroll stops and you think you did something wrong, the device crashed. Certainly doesn't feel like it's just loading. It's not doing something natural. I know that my wife told me that when she's using her iPad and it stops scrolling, she thinks that her finger did something wrong, like her finger was broken or something. But regardless, it doesn't feel right. So this brings me to this, conventions. If you remember, if you're my age, if you're in your 30s, you remember this. When you were a kid, I grew up with this stuff. I know what a close box is, what a scroll is. There are conventions of clicky interfaces, desktop interfaces that are just second nature. Mobile has conventions too, and those conventions are part of what make an interface feel responsive. Oh yeah, that's my cat. She's very friendly. The slide to unlock. Now, if you remember when the iPhone first came out, no one had ever done this. So that's why it has to say slide to unlock. I recently got a Kindle Fire. It has the same widget, but it doesn't say what you're supposed to do. Because there's a convention now. People see this on a touch interface, and they know, oh, I'm supposed to slide to unlock. So conventions have already built up around touch interfaces. And when you break those conventions, again, it feels like the interface is not working properly. So on a web page, how do we handle it? We get 3 big events: touch start, touch move, touch end. Touch start fires once, touch end fires once. This is really all you need to do almost every possible interaction or gesture. On iOS, you get the touches array. It's the same in Android, but you only get 1 touch. Ice cream sandwich theoretically has more, but I haven't actually seen it in action yet. On iOS, you get 11 touch points. I'm not sure what the 11th is for, but you get it. Each touch gives you position information, and sometimes it gives you scale and rotation. There's a synthetic gesture. I'll talk about that in a minute, but even if you just pinch on a regular array, those touches array give you some information about scale, which we'll use in a minute for pinch to zoom. On iOS, there's gesture events. I don't recommend using those because they only work on iOS. And if you look around this room, there's a lot of Android devices out there. And if you're using iOS-only stuff, you're probably making a mistake. The gesture start, gesture end, it's really handy. You can do pinch to zoom easier. You can do rotation easier. Just forget it exists. The best source for information about these events is Apple provides a complete documentation of everything you need to know about touch events. However, you have to use your brain a little bit to figure out where Android's not going to work or where your Android problems are going to happen. So that said, how do I make it work? How do I make it feel not crappy? So the first tip, prioritize user feedback. There's nothing more important than while you're making a gesture, telling the user you heard the gesture. So you have to use hardware acceleration, and you need to manage your memory. 256 megabytes of RAM, remember that? That's like nothing. Probably most of us have at least 4 gigs on our desktop. So what does it mean to prioritize user feedback? Don't do anything when someone's doing a gesture. Don't load stuff, don't calculate, because everything is expensive, and in JavaScript, everything blocks. With some exceptions, I'll talk about that in a minute. Now, treat the DOM as write only. This has been really beneficial at Flickr. So you do your own math. And when it's also possible, CSS transitions. Because then you're offloading the work into a separate thread, and it's not blocking the UI. Sorry. So what do I mean when I say write-only DOM? So DOM touches are really expensive, no matter what. Anytime you have to ask the DOM a question or set something to the DOM, work has to be done, and it's going to be blocking execution of the JS. So you already know where everything on the page is. You have a device that uses WebKit, so you know a pixel is a pixel. So you've kept track of where everything is. You don't have to keep checking. You don't need to feel insecure and make sure you got everything right. And the other thing is use matrix transforms. I'll tell you more about that later, but it's a really great way to handle it. So the swipe gesture. This is the most common gesture you see on a mobile interface. If your web page supports touch, it needs to support swipes. One touch I really like, no pun intended, on the New York Times website, they have these featured photos. They don't say anything on them about swipeable, but they are swipeable. You can touch and swipe because it's a natural expectation. If I see a photo or if I see any kind of content, I think I could interact with it with swipes. The swipe gesture is easy, right? It's distance equals my current position minus my start position. Apply it to Translate 3D. I use Translate 3D because it's hardware accelerated. That means you're getting that off of the CPU. You need the CPU for doing JavaScript. Another important trick is what I call the snap back, snap forward. So if you recall on the iPhone or iOS device, when you scroll with your finger, if you hit the bottom of the page doesn't just stop. It keeps going, you let go, and it bounces back. That's what I was talking about before, the feedback, the telling the user that you heard what they were saying. So if I scroll down and the scroll just stopped, I wouldn't know if the page crashed, if my finger broke, something didn't work, or I wouldn't know what to think. But by bouncing back, you tell the user, oh, I heard your scroll, but you're just at the bottom of the page. So the same thing you need to do. When you swipe, if that gesture is happening, your element has to be moving. So then you schedule a snap. You know how far is too far. You know how far is not far enough. So when they let go, you snap forward and use a transition for that. iOS uses physics for the scroll. They actually calculate momentum and have it pretty nice. You don't really need to do that. It's better, but it's expensive. You have to calculate it in JS. You have to do the math. Just schedule a transition with easing. In my experience, it's close enough, and it'll do the job. Another word about scrolling. Use native scrolling if you can, because there's a lot of people out there who, to overcome some interface of things, have implemented scrolling themselves. But scrolling is the most fundamental interaction you do with the device. So if you are trying to make scrolling feel right, you're up against a real, you have to crawl up a long way because the user knows intuitively what scrolling is going to be like. These days you can use WebKit Overflow scrolling. It's pretty nice. It doesn't quite work. It works well enough. It doesn't bounce the whole way. So what happens is it bounces the entire page. But the libraries like Scrollability and iScroll4, they'll handle that bouncing, but use native when available. One of the things everyone wants to be able to do is pinch to zoom. Pinch to zoom is, like I said, like the slide to unlock, like to swipe, is a fundamental interaction with the iOS device. So users come to your web page, and the first thing they do, if they see something they can't see, is they start unpinching. With the Flickr website, we didn't support pinch to zoom for a long time, and our users were constantly complaining because they saw a small photo, they wanted it bigger, and pinch to zoom didn't work. We had broken the interface. Now, why can't you just use native pinch to zoom? People ask this all the time about Flickr. Why don't you just enable pinch to zoom? Because native pinch to zoom is for zooming on a web page, not zooming in on a part of a web page. There's no API. There's no way to control it. So the user zooms in, and they lose the entire interface. So how do you make pinch to zoom? I'm sorry, this is totally difficult. And the more I think about it, the more difficult it is. But it's possible. You can do it. It's just going to require some thinking. So use matrix transforms. That keeps you off the DOM as much as possible. You can queue up all the different changes you need to make those transformations to the matrix, and then apply them. Anyone who talks about matrix transforms throws this up, so there you go. This is actually not that useful to you because you don't need to know the math. If you're not doing rotation, this is all you need to know. Those are scale, those are translate. The actual facts of how matrix mathematics work, what is happening when a transform is being applied, it's really interesting. You can do cool stuff. Most of what you need to do, you don't need to know about. For 3D, this is the yellow ones. Those are scale. The green is translate. That's all you need to know. The rest, you can just let it go. Unless you want to, then you can do some neat stuff. The cool thing about transforms, though, is it keeps sort of whatever complex state you figured out. And for pinch to zoom, it's really important because you have multiple transforms. Rather than applying them one at a time, remember, each time you touch the DOM, it's not free. So this allows you to queue up the transforms, apply them in one go, and then move on. OK, so pinch to zoom. The hard part about pinch to zoom is understanding what's actually happening. So the first thing you do is determine the center of the touch points, determine the scale factor, and scale the element, blah, 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 blah. It's a lot, right? It's easier to look at. I found it's easier to explain if you can actually see it. So if pinch to zoom works the way the demos work, it would be like this. The center point of the object is the little star. So you pinch with your finger, and if you just apply the scale value to the image or the element, it's going to scale out from the center. So that feels wrong, right? Because the experience of pinch to zoom is like I'm stretching the image. But this approach makes it look like I'm turning a dial or something. I'm not stretching the image. So this is what it's supposed to be like. It's supposed to scale around the center of the touch points. So how do you do that? It's pretty simple. We scale, and then we translate. So you have to figure out how much to translate by to keep the center of the scale point in the same place. Now, the math to do this takes a while to derive. I'm not going to explain it because I did the work for you. You need to set the transform origin to the top left. Here's your magic formula. This gives you the number you want. It took me a long time to figure this out. There's a lot of people who try and explain the math. I found that you probably don't need to understand it. You just need to use it. And like all good presentations, I have some pro tips. The virtual pixels on high DPI Android devices and on iOS devices, and actually on all iOS devices, what you think is a pixel is a sort of a nebulous number that's kind of derived from the pixels, but it's not device pixels. So when you say, oh, I want to go to 321 on the device, it's giving you a number based on whatever you set the viewport width in meta tag. So it's not really pixels. It's just a grid reference. Now, in order to move things by pixels, it's going to have to round. So you're trusting the device to do rounding. That's why moving the transform origin doesn't work. Because if you move the transform origin, which some of you might have thought is naturally the easiest way to change the center of scale, there's only so many pixels it can move it by. So the more you scale, the more it's rounding and the less accurate that center becomes. So as you scale out, it starts to slip around. So let's talk about what we did at Flickr. The Flickr Touch Lightbox it took a lot of time, but it's actually really simple. This is what it looks like. It's Flickr, so it's cats. It's really like that on the device, by the way. It is that fast, and that's thanks to Translate 3D. So it's simple. It's like any carousel. I'm keeping 3 nodes open. The next, the previous, and the one you're looking at. I only move what you can see, which seems pretty obvious. It took me a long time to realize. So when you start to swipe, I move 2 of the images. So if you're swiping to the left, I move the center and the next, or to the right, the opposite. And I move them separately because it turns out that moving them as one element doesn't get you anything in performance. I tried it out. I think the fact is it still has to do the work. There's an event listener on the top for all events. Because you don't want to have the user to have to worry about where they're swiping, especially if they're swiping between slides. They just want to be able to grab anywhere. I use Translate 3D, and I do everything when you stop moving. So when the user is swiping, nothing is happening. I set like a semaphore so I can make sure that if I think something should happen, I can queue it up for later and wait to do the operations after the gesture is done. Because remember, the most important thing is user feedback. So if you stop, and you're going to stop if you touch the DOM, you'll make it feel slow. Even if it's fast, even if, oh, I'm preloading images while they're swiping, oh my gosh, that's so great, because it feels bad, because preloading isn't free. The device has to do work. So, aggressive pruning. I think as front-end developers, we get in the habit of letting the browser do garbage collection. We believe the browser can handle memory. We don't have to worry about memory. 256 megabytes of RAM. So you can't have anything. Now, one thing I discovered, and I have another slide for this, but thinking about it now, is that when you offload things to the hardware acceleration, you say Translate 3D. When it runs out of memory for the textures, it just crashes on the iOS device. It doesn't swap, because where is it going to swap? It just crashes. So the way I handle that is aggressively pruning. I make sure there's only 3 nodes other than the interface there at all times. I clean off the CSS transforms. So once the transform's done, I take it off. Then it's not on the hardware anymore. I just say transform equals null, and then it's clean. Write only DOM. I read it once at the beginning of the session, and then I keep track of what's going on. Because there's really no point in reading. You already know what's happening. And again, like I said, I don't do anything. When it's swiping, the only job of the JavaScript is to move the swiped element. Keep going the wrong way. So a couple of frustrating limitations. The right screen is huge and device memory is small. I found that Apple's trying to optimize this a lot. They're trying to make sure you don't crash the device. But that means that pinch to zoom only gets you so much because you can only make I forget what it is now. I think it's 1024 on a side. It's 3 megapixels anyway for a JPEG, maximum, that it will display. If the image is bigger than that, it downsamples it. So you're pinching to zoom, but the image was downsampled, and you don't get to look into it. So the way to handle that is to tile like a map, but we haven't done that at Flickr yet. Hardware acceleration is crashy. It doesn't do anything but crash. It doesn't seem to like slow down. It just crashes. And like, there's tons of little places in iOS where it's trying to automatically optimize. It's trying to outthink you as a developer because it thinks you're an idiot. So it's trying to help the user to make it fast, but it's optimizing in ways that might make it frustrating for you as a developer. So I just found lots of places where and that was really frustrating sometimes. I guess I'm going fast. I must be nervous or something. But here's the image. You love me? I'm glad you love me. Here's a SlideShare link. Does anyone have any questions? OK, there is no tools. OK, he wanted to know what kind of tools I use to monitor memory. The tool I use is the browser crashed. That's the trick. The tooling isn't great. The simulators don't work. So they work, but they're not the same, so you can't trust them. So if you're developing on Android or iOS, you need a device in your hand because the simulator, I mean, it literally is not the same thing. So I guess what I did is I would push it as far as it would go, watch it crash, and then start rolling it back until it worked. We're also used to using these great tools like the Chrome Developer Tool, which does work on iOS. I can't remember what it's called now. There's a proxy you can use that will actually run the WebKit developer tools on iOS, which is really handy. But it still doesn't tell you when the memory card's going to barf and crash. You just have to try it.
Hi, for those that don't know, I'm with the Accessibility Lab here at Yahoo. And whenever you use a touch gesture, a custom test gesture with JavaScript, it fails as soon as you turn on a screen reader. And we haven't found the solution for this yet. So all that we ask until we do find that perfect solution is make sure you have backup buttons. Don't make the only way someone could do something on your site a custom swipe. So if you have an alternate set of buttons or something like that, it'll work with the screen readers for now. But that is one thing that we are worried about. And you can see that they have the newer and older buttons at the top.
I'd like to mention, too, from accessibility, I didn't mention the images are divs. I found out that image tags are way slower than divs in terms of performance. And I don't know why. It just is. But what that did is it didn't tell the screen readers that there was an image. So they have a blog post on YDN about this, about how we used the ARIA role image on the div to tell the screen reader that there was an image in this in the interface. Other questions? Do you want to get onto the sound?
All right, looks like we're done.
Thanks.